Morning, everyone. Hello. Today I'm going to be discussing something a little bit weird. It is the prospects that the Conservatives may, although without intending to, be taking themselves to court. Now, you may think at this point, I must be talking about Andrew Bridgen, who has threatened to take Matt Hancock to court if he didn't apologise, and he hasn't apologised. No. It's much more weird than that. So it's about ULEZ. Now, the other day, I was actually complaining about how everything's so London-centric in our politics. And now I'm going to discuss something that only applies to London. But this is proper clown car politics. This is really weird. And I'm going to have to go through a bit of background. So for those who don't know, ULEZ is the ultra-low emission zone in London. And the Tories are absolutely fuming about it, no pun intended. It is a way of trying to reduce emissions. The first stage of it has already been successful in cleaning London's air up, because it's a public health measure, basically. You could also argue it's an environmental measure, but ultimately it's a public health measure. So the Conservatives are not very happy about it because it sort of applies restrictions. Now, your vehicles have to be ULEZ compliant, otherwise they have to pay fees for traveling around these zones effectively. I'm not going to go into all the details, and I'm not from London, and I don't very often go to London. In fact, I went to London last year to speak at the National Rejoin March, and that was the first time I'd been to London in like over 20 years. So you thought other cities had ULEZ. This is a big one, but I mean, this particular issue is specific to London. So several Conservative councils in London are opposed to this because effectively what a Labour politician has done is applied a public health measure. Well, Conservatives don't care about public health in a way that they see as restrictive, or because it's almost like a sort of tax, isn't it? If your vehicle is not ULEZ compliant, if the emissions are too high, it's almost like an additional tax. So they don't like that either. So red rag to a bull, and several Conservative councils have taken it to court. Now, this is quite spectacular because you think to yourself, hang on a minute, Phil, you said Conservatives taking themselves to court. This is Conservatives taking Labour to court. No, this is beautiful. So first of all, the arguments were all things like, it's undemocratic, he shouldn't be doing this, undemocratic. And I tried to point out, no, Sadiq Khan promised he was going to do this. He was last elected in 2021? And he promised to do it, and I had people that, no, he said he wouldn't do it. And I go to their manifesto, Sadiq Khan's manifesto, and it's clear as day. It's right there in his 2021 manifesto. It says on the front, Sadiq Khan for London 2021, that he will be expanding the ULEZ. So they can't argue it's undemocratic. Now, they're trying to argue it's unlawful. And okay, fine, go. If you think something's unlawful, by all means, take it to court. So they've taken it to court. They had their initial hearing. They presented 5 challenges to this expansion. And the court threw 3 of them out straight away, basically saying, don't be silly. And it's allowed 2 of them to go forward. But it has said in each case, he said, you might have an argument, but it's a bit borderline. And in one case, it's like, most of this challenge is probably rubbish, but I will give you the chance. So the right-wing media are all cock-a-hoop thinking it's going to be now labelled as illegal just because at this hearing, a judge said, maybe you might be able to argue 1.5 of these 5 points, right? The Conservative councils have allocated £400,000 of taxpayer money to take this case to court. And of course, the Mayor of London, in defending it, will also have to use public money. And this is where it gets weird now, because on the face of it, you've got, okay, this is Conservative councils who don't like the fact that this, and remember, the ULEZ system, and people who live in London can tell me more about it, it doesn't stop you driving in London. it simply dissuades you from doing so in high emission vehicles by applying a charge. Okay, so it doesn't stop you, it simply applies a charge. So basically what the Conservatives are complaining about is this charge in order to drive using certain vehicles in certain parts of London. Listen to this. So someone yesterday posted around Twitter a news article from several years ago. This is 2020. This is before the mayoral election. So Sadiq Khan was the mayor because he won the previous one as well. But this was before. But it was, he had already announced that he was going to expand ULEZ, right? There is an article, and for those watching not live, we'll post this in the description below. It won't be there as this is live, but it will be later on. And it's from On London. So it's a London-based news media organisation, media outlet. And it talks, and this is from 2020, a year before the mayoral election, or half a year before the mayoral election. And it talks about a letter from Grant Shapps. Now, Grant Shapps was the Transport Secretary for Boris Johnson's government, so a Conservative Secretary of State. And as a little aside, we're talking about Boris Johnson. So Boris Johnson was the previous mayor of London. He was mayor of London before Sadiq Khan. And he tried to claim that he left the finances in good order and Sadiq Khan trashed them for Transport for London. In reality, the opposite is true. Boris Johnson left the finances in a shocking state, and the records show this, and Sadiq Khan put them in good order. However, 2020, what happens in 2020? Pandemic hits. Transport for London runs a huge mass transport system for a metropolis. There's not many of those around the world. Pandemic comes in, lockdown comes in. Obviously, this public transport's not really going to be used. So there's going to be huge losses in income for this massive mass transit system, right? So London needs some emergency funding from central government. Straight away a problem, because you're talking about a Labour mayor having to ask for money from a Conservative government, and the worst Conservative government we've ever had. So Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, according to this article, they've seen a letter from him to Sadiq Khan. And he says, you can have the money, Mr. Carmiel China, but you have got to expand the congestion charge area to the areas where you want to expand ULEZ. Basically, what you get from the quoted bits from the letter, I haven't seen the letter itself, but from this news article, Grant Shapps is not only supporting this expansion of ULEZ, but he wants the congestion charges, which, you know, were generally just for the centre of London. He wanted the congestion charges to be expanded for where Sadiq Khan wanted the ULEZ expansion to go to as well. And again, I'll remind people what these Conservative councils are opposed to is not cleaner air. They don't care about the cleaner air. What they care about is the charges that apply if your vehicle is not ULEZ compliant. In other words, it doesn't have ultra low emissions, basically, if it's not an electric vehicle. Or actually, no, that's not true. Most modern cars will actually meet them, I gather. But, you know, if you've got older ones, say. So there's, and yet the Conservative government actually wanted these congestion of charges to apply to this wider area, which covers these Conservative councils. So what's really happening is these Conservative councillors who don't like the charge, because that's the only thing they can object to, the charges. They don't like these charges, but it's a Conservative government that forced Sadiq Khan to make sure that these charges applied to a wider area than he otherwise would have done. So by taking this policy to court, the Conservatives are effectively taking their own government to court, although albeit a government that existed last year, a few years ago. Anyway, let's go through some comments before I add some more thoughts to it, because there will be some people from London who can add some nuance as well. Oh, have I seen the report that vehicle pollution is causing health problems from conception to death? Well, yeah, this is ultimately what this is about. This ULEZ, you might think ultra low emissions is really an environmental measure. It's actually not. It's a public health measure. It's because, I mean, I lived in Manchester for a few years. I lived a lot. The route I took to go from my digs in a place called Fallowfield in Manchester to the university was along what was at the time the busiest bus route in Europe. And it was absolutely always chock-a-block with buses, always. In fact, sometimes I would, out of sheer laziness, get the bus into university. It was actually quicker to walk because it took 10 minutes to load the bus up. It took about 15 minutes to get to the university. Then it took about another 10 minutes sometimes to get off the bus because everyone was getting off at the same point. It took half an hour to walk. So it was usually so. But if you walked down that route, you would often get, oh, Graham say he lived in Fallowfield as well. So I was at Oak House. You may have been at Owen Park or something, I don't know. And the claim to fame there is that's where Rick Mail stayed when he was at university. But anyway, I don't even know if it's still there. When you walked along there, I often got headaches because of the pollution, the buses spouting out all these fumes. But it does more than just short-term things like headaches because of the carbon monoxide. You know, the small particles getting you lung, it causes health problems, it causes respiratory problems. So what this ULEZ scheme is ultimately a public health measure. It is a way of allowing people to live longer. Now, I did see a comment about the implementation of it. Now, again, you can, whenever you introduce a scheme for a particular purpose, you will always be able to argue, could the implementation be done differently, could be done better? You know, you can always have reviews for things like that. In fact, someone's saying here, I'm not against it, but wouldn't ULEZ be better brought in when the infrastructure is actually there to accommodate them? I think charging points. Again, I don't live in London. And I don't spend my days looking at every aspect of it. So I wouldn't be able to really say about that. You know, what I would say is, again, you've got a situation here where Conservative councillors are putting aside hundreds of thousands of pounds of taxpayer money to try and declare the scheme unlawful when it's a scheme that was supported by, and in fact, the Conservative government effectively wanted it expanded because they wanted the congestion. So you've got like two types of charge, you could argue. You've got your congestion charge, which is for all, as I understand it, I don't live in London. I'm never driving in London. I'm not a lunatic. But you've got your congestion charge, which means if you travel in certain zones in London, you will pay for it. Doesn't matter what sort of vehicle you've got, as far as I can tell. Well, if it's got a license plate, anyway. And then you've got your ULEZ area, which is you pay a charge if your vehicle doesn't meet the emissions standards. Otherwise, you don't, you're exempt. There are other exemptions as well. If you've got like a big lorry, then you're exempt as well. There are certain vehicles that are exempt. And hi, Max. We've got Wild Max in the chat again. So what they're doing is the Conservatives wanted the charging expanded. So here's the situation, right? So let's say you've got a low emission vehicle. It doesn't have to be an electric vehicle as I understand it. It could just be a low emission vehicle, right? You're driving around this expanded ULEZ area. Sadiq Khan's not charging you for it. No restrictions. You carry on, son. You drive around. The Conservative government wanted congestion charges to apply in that zone. So everyone's going to get hit by these charges. And that is ultimately what the councils are complaining about, charges. But it's the fault of the Conservative government. The Conservative government are forcing the Labour mayor to apply those charges, those extra congestion charges, even though it's not an area that is considered congested. It's absolutely mad. You couldn't make it up. You know, really, the Conservatives are effectively going to courts to complain about charges which are the fault of the Conservative government. They are literally, as well, figuratively, really, they're figuratively taking their own party to court. And I would think at some point during the proceedings. Now, admittedly, it may be that this court case collapses very quickly because, like I say, they brought 5 challenges for which they've already paid public money for solicitors to go through. They've come up with 5 challenges. The court has immediately thrown 3 of them out as being ridiculous. They've allowed 2 of them to go through as being what I think the word I can't remember the exact word, and I think the phrase described by the judge is reported in the news as on the cusp. In other words, it's borderline. You could look at this and go, this clearly should be out, but maybe you've got an argument. Let's let it through. So it could collapse really quickly when it actually goes to court proper with the judicial review. But at some point, let's say it ends up getting bogged down. You can imagine Sadiq Khan coming up with this letter from the Conservative government saying that they wanted they not only wanted this ULEZ expansion, because that's what the letter says. Yeah, great, this expansion's fantastic. The letter from Grant Shapps, the Conservative Transport Secretary, says, we also want you to expand the congestion charge area to cover all this same area. That is not something Sadiq Khan wanted to do. That is something that Boris Johnson and Grant Shapps wanted to do. They forced Sadiq Khan to agree to it in return for the emergency pandemic funding for Transport for London. You couldn't make it up. John's saying there, the transport is magic inside London compared to outside. Oh, it's superb public transport system. I hate it because I would hate to live in London. When I went to London last year and had to go on the underground, and it was October, so it was autumn. It was so hot. Obviously, it's hot under there, but it was so hot, so noisy. For someone like me who sort of likes, I'm not going to say I like the wide open spaces because I like living sat at my computer, but I don't like the busyness. I'll go to London. I will always go to London if I sort of need to go to London. I just suck it up and get on with it. But I do find it stressful. But in terms of London's not just a big city. It is an actual metropolis. So you're talking Tokyo, New York level metropolis. And, the transport system is absolutely superb in terms of getting you around. And it's relatively straightforward to follow because I am a bit of an idiot when it comes to getting around and I could get myself to where I needed to go. So saying, I'm in favour of electric vehicles, okay with ULEZ, but if electric cars are heavier, do they produce more tyre particulates? I don't know, in all honesty. Although, interestingly, Goodyear are now making a tyre. It's not made out of rubber. It's effectively an organic tyre. I think let me see if I can find it. I can't remember what it's called. I'm going to have to spell it the American way to get it. 90% sustainable material. Let me see what it's made of. So blah, blah, blah. This is from Ohio, so in America. The Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company unveiled a demonstration tire comprised of 90% sustainable materials. The demonstration tire has passed all applicable regulatory testing, as well as Goodyear's internal testing. So, cut and paste it. In Ohio, it might be, mightn't it? I don't know. Does it say? I'd have to read the whole thing. It'd be a bit boring, I suspect. So, but no, yeah. So, and we may well find that a lot of the things that we would be worried about at the moment would be might not be an issue in the future. We don't have to make tires apparently out of rubber. we can use whatever the hell they have in Ohio that is sustainable. But again, you could. I've just right. Well, it's no need to go through the list of it. Isn't London the biggest city in the Northern Hemisphere? I don't know. In terms of population, do you mean? I really don't know. There is a particular issue that we've got with London. As I say, this is what I was complaining about on Tuesday, the fact that it just sucks all investment into it. So naturally, lots of people are attracted there, and that's basically where loads of people live, millions of people. And you know, we are, if you think about like New York and Tokyo, for example, they are both, they're metropoli themselves, but they are both in countries with a much larger population than we have. So even if they were all the same size, and I don't actually know what the relative populations are, even if they're all of the same size, the London proportionally as a percentage population of the entire country is going to be way higher than Tokyo or New York, because Japan's got what? Nearly double our population or something. I can't remember offhand. The United States is way more. How many? What's their population? I can't even remember. It's hundreds of thousands. So, you know, London proportionally is massive, and it does absolutely just suck everything into it. But anyway, let's have a look. Tokyo's bigger, and that is in the Northern Hemisphere. There you go. I don't know. But it's certainly in Europe. I don't think there is another metropolis in Europe. And as I say, you are going to, if you don't do anything. I mean, bear in mind, we had a situation decades ago, long before I was born, where people literally died in just walking the streets of London. I don't mean Jack the Ripper. I mean, just the air, the smog killed people. So that ended up generating clean air legislation. So all Sadiq Khan has done is take the next step, really. You know, he's acted to clean up the air, because even if you've not got, if you can't see or feel or smell the pollution, it's those small particles that get caught in your lung that damage the heart, damage the lungs. And, you know, so reducing emissions in London, as I say, it's not an environmental measure. It is a public health measure. It is a way of actually helping people live longer, and not just live longer, but live healthier lives. Because, you know, if you start to get heart conditions in your 40s, just because you grew up and lived in London, and there's something you can do about it. But there it is. You know, this is I just find the situation mad that the Conservatives are taking this to court. And what they're actually objecting to is something that the Conservative government imposed on the Mayor of London. So they think they're taking a Labour mayor to court, and literally they are. But at some point, surely, Sadiq Khan is going to explain that not only did the Conservative government approve of this expansion of ULEZ, they wanted the congestion charge, which will apply to everyone, applied. So they're taking themselves to court. The Conservatives are basically taking the Conservatives to court here. In fact, Tony's saying there, compliant cars are from 2006 onwards. Well, there you go then. I mean, for goodness sake, you've got to have a car like 18 years old before it's not compliant. And 2016 for diesel vehicles, well, that'll be round about Dieselgate, won't it? So I suspect the ones before that, was that hit by the Volkswagen scandal, that it has to be from 2016 onwards. But anyway, that's, you know, so ultimately the only chargers that most people, because most people are going to have a car that's, you know, within that range, really, aren't they? I suppose diesel cars, but even a diesel car, it'd have to be like 8 years old before it's no longer compliant. A lot of people, I mean, yes, people are going to have older diesel cars, and diesel cars tend to run for longer anyway. But a lot of people are going to have newer cars than that. So realistically, mostly the people who are going to be paying charges at all in this expanded area are going to be paying congestion charges. And those congestion charges are not Sadiq Khan's idea. That's the Conservatives' idea. It's proper clown car politics, this. Proper clown car politics. Last few comments before we have to sort of kill it. Do I think changing from a service economy to something else would be beneficial? If so, which direction would I choose? I don't think we can quickly. I mean, we should really try and get in on the ground floor when it comes to developing green technology. But we have massively hurt ourselves there. Brexit has caused huge problems linking up markets, even if not getting at, because we need to get access to, raw materials. And we need to be able to sell the products of that. Because here's the thing. Let's say and we're not even investing at the moment. The government are not even investing. But let's say we invested in developing green tech in this country, right? So then we invest in various startups, and a few of them end up coming up with something really great, really revolutionary. So they're going to go into full production. Fantastic. UK-based full production. No. Because they will struggle to sell their products in Europe as well as anywhere else. They will struggle to sell. They'll have trade barriers to selling it anywhere other than Britain. So what will this startup now do? It will build a factory in Germany or Belgium or something, or France, because then they'll be able to sell to the much larger market more easily. So, don't get me wrong, I would favor a hugely changed economy. But in terms of, if you don't go for services, you have to go for goods of some kind. We're going to struggle. Manufacturing is always going to be on its arse now until we have freer access to other markets. And we've shut ourselves out of the largest genuine free trade area in the world. Nick Clegg used to talk about a mixed economy. Nick Clegg talked about all sorts of stuff, though, didn't he? Nothing ever happened. But anyway, we'll have to call it there. Thanks very much for coming on again this morning. Don't forget to click the like button and to subscribe. And if you would like to support the channel further, Patreon link. For those watching not live, there will be links to things in the description below, including references to things I've talked about today, including that news article. Have a good morning or afternoon or evening, depending on when you are watching this. And yes, I'll see you later.